Morning, everyone. For many neurodivergent people, food can be a big issue, and I've spoken a little bit about how to make meal planning easier. But I've been reflecting on food approaches historically and how unhealthy and unhelpful they can be if someone does have issues around eating, whether that's sensory related or for some other reason. Um, I remember as a child there were many foods that I wouldn't eat, and there were a number of expectations on us that made this quite challenging for me. So all of the food was served at a table, and we all sat down around the table and we were expected to help ourselves. So the advantage of this is I didn't have to take the foods I didn't like. The disadvantage is that I had all of these food smells right in front of me. There was no getting away from anything I didn't like the look of. We were also, as was common with many people, with parents of the older generation, we were expected to finish everything on our plates. And I remember that there were many occasions where I would sit for an hour after the meal had ended on my own in the dining room, playing with my food because I wasn't hungry or I couldn't bring myself to eat it. Now, for me, these approaches can have damaging consequences. So, for example, if you expect your child to eat everything, you're taking away the opportunity for them to learn self-regulation in terms of how much food they need. You're taking away the opportunity for them to judge their own hunger needs, what they need, how much they need, how quickly they need to eat or how slowly they need to eat, because we all have different ways that we eat. And, there are some people that inhale their food quite quickly. My general approach would be to try and slow down, to be able to notice what you're eating, to appreciate the food, to appreciate the flavours and textures. Because by eating more slowly, your body has a greater chance of recognising when it's full. Whereas if you eat fast, sometimes you can overeat and your body will have filled itself up before you even notice that it's becoming full. However, for some children who find eating really difficult, sometimes eating quickly is better because they will eat the food before they realise they've eaten it. For us, we use screens as a distraction sometimes, particularly for our youngest child who has big issues with smells and textures of food. So for her, being able to distract herself whilst she's eating means that she actually eats more than she might otherwise eat. So for us, that's really valuable. We very rarely have a meal sitting down together, and I do miss this because I used to love the whole sitting down together as a family and talking. But I've come to realise that doesn't actually serve everyone. Some people like the silence of eating on their own and the peace of having downtime, not having to interact with other people. Additionally, if you do have different food needs, then serving it all up in one go might actually be too stressful. For us, sometimes we make separate food for the children and separate food for ourselves. So that's 3 meals. Getting them all ready on time is sometimes impossible. And often, because our daughter doesn't like the smell of many cooking foods, we will feed her first before the smells of other food cooking have kind of infiltrated our home. And we have quite an open plan house, so there's no doors to the kitchen. There's 2 entrances to the kitchen, here and here. But no doors to either. It's a circular shape for the main living area, so it's impossible to block food smells. We do have a massive stash of vanilla candles that we burn when the food smells become too much for her. And often I will light the vanilla candle before I start cooking so that the house is filled with a smell that is tolerable to everyone before the food smells impinge into their space. So what have I said so far? We use other smells to mask the smell. I will open windows and use extractor fan if it's not too cold, the window element anyway. We use screens, we eat at different times. Needing to be mindful that sometimes people do need downtime around meal times, that it's a chance to have a bit of peace and quiet rather than a social thing. Not everyone sees eating as a social activity. As well as being forced to eat everything, I would say forced, as well as the older generation often having an approach that it's important to eat everything on your plate. There's also something about needing to try a bit of everything or just have a little bit on your plate. And actually, certainly for children with ARFID, that can feel too much. If you're going to present small items of food to them, I strongly suggest it goes on a separate plate, because sometimes having it on the same plate can mean that they don't want to eat the safe food that's on that plate because it's just too close, even if it's not touching. If I think of anything more, I will share more, but I do think that the issue around food, certainly for children who have difficulties with food, is to create an environment that is relaxed as possible and stress-free as possible around eating. If you try and encourage your child to eat, even if it feels like it's gentle or kindly, even that can sometimes be too much. And I think I've shared on here before that we use a food ladder. So if we want our children to try a different food, particularly the younger one, we will present a list of where she's ready to go with this food. And it might just be looking at it. It might be touching it with a knife and fork. It might be smelling it at a distance, not even close up. So these are some of the earlier steps that you can try. Playing with food and food preparation is also really good. So food preparation with no intention to eat. If they're happy to prepare food that they're eating, that's fantastic. Playing with food that there's no intention to eat can be a really good one. Certainly with younger kids, and I wish I'd seen this when mine were little. Instead of using paint, you can put food colouring in yoghurt, and then your children can eat the yoghurt whilst they're painting with it. Obviously, you do need to make a distinction if you ever do use real paint, that they do not eat that. But, there are creative ways that you can get children to have greater exposure to different types of food without actually them having to put it in their mouths. The later stages of this food ladder are obviously licking, rinsing with water, maybe biting, spitting out, rinsing with water, with the final stage being actually eating. And eating might literally just be eating one small bite. And, to eating a whole plate of something or even a few mouthfuls of something is actually quite a few stages above having one bite of something. So it's really important to go very slowly. I hope that this is helpful for those of you who perhaps struggle with food yourself or who have children who struggle with food. It really is, you really do have to be creative sometimes in order to get a reasonably nutritious diet. It can be very difficult. But also, don't put pressure on yourself or your child. Any progress is progress, and eating is eating. So, so long as you're not losing weight, then you're doing something right. If you are losing weight, then it's really important to be able to speak to a professional, especially for children or especially for people who don't really have any weight to lose. If you're overweight, then, a couple of pounds here and there are not going to be so problematic than if you're underweight, obviously. So if you do have any concerns about your physical health or your weight level, then please do speak to a professional about this. But there are many things that you can do to just support yourself, be kind to yourself, be gentle with yourself. And also remember, you don't have to eat a balanced diet every day. If you can balance it out over the week or the month, that is great too. Take care, everyone.